Thank you very much. And for the purposes of information management policies that we have in the civil service, whilst just to begin the recording, that I did ask to confirm that I did ask if there were any objections for recording, and none were received. And so this event is now being recorded. Thank you very much. Can I also remind colleagues that we as civil servants have to abide by the Civil Service Code at all times, that the freedom of information and subject to request policies also apply, including to any written communication in the chat function, and that our home departments and governments also have a set of values and behaviours that we are expected to abide by. We will be hearing from a panel session this morning who will be sharing their personal lived experiences, and we thank them for that. Welcome to this special event hosted by the Civil Service Race Forum in partnership with the race networks from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. My name is Usman Ali, and I am proud to serve as the Scottish Government Race Equality Network Strategic Development Officer, and honoured to have been asked to host this event. Some housekeeping just before we begin. To reiterate, please switch off your cameras unless you are a panel speaker, and press the mute button. I think everybody has done that. If you'd like to ask a question, so it is an interactive session where firstly there's going to be some light touch, I hope, conversations with the panel members that you can see on the screen before you, and then inviting you to also interact by raising your hand to ask your question in person if you wish, or if you would rather post it on the chat function. Chris Ironside is on the call, and he's going to be helping to monitor the conversations and feed it back to me, and I can ask the question on your behalf. So colleagues, the purpose of our gathering today is to hear from Civil Service Race Network leads from across the country, and really to launch a really exciting initiative that some of us have been involved in over the past couple of months, which is of course to develop a Civil Service Race Networks directory, and for the purposes of that, there are so many race networks, and it's a great thing to see that so many race networks exist right across the whole civil service, and we wanted to kind of find a good space to make sure that we're recording that all of us exist, and to share contact details so that we can all enhance our collaboration and all the great work that we're doing to really amplify that. And to get even more impact. I'm delighted that we're joined by some fantastic guests that you can see before us. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce them. So we have Sharon Lowe, who is the co-chair of the Civil Service Race Forum. We have McLennan, who is the co-chair of the Scottish Government's Race Equality Network. We have Samiya Ahmed, who is the co-chair of the Welsh Government's Minority Ethnic Staff Network, and we have Alfie Wong, who is the chair of the Northern Ireland Civil Service Race and Ethnicity Network. Welcome to you all. To kick us off, I'd like to just ask kind of informally some kind of questions, get some conversation going amongst us all. See what else is happening within your own networks. So I'm just going to come to you one by one, and just to ask you for kind of a short update on kind of key things of interest that your network's working on or priorities. So shall we start with Tay? Do you want to go first?
Thanks, Usman. So just to give a bit of background, I suppose, is that our Race Equality Network was set up in 2007, and it's a community of minority ethnic staff across core Scottish Government and those agencies where their HR function is carried out by the Scottish Government People Directorate. We are a staff-led network of volunteers who promote achieving greater race equality through corporate practices and also investing in the minority ethnic workforce. And through the network, including its subgroups, we have subgroups like the Black Identity Group and the Minority Ethnic Women's Group. We are a collective voice, and we work in partnership to contribute ideas and solutions, whilst also holding up that mirror to challenge where is necessary and appropriate. And we do all of this so that all minority ethnic staff can enjoy equal opportunities and success within the Scottish Government. We work collaboratively with all diversity networks so that we can ensure we have lived experiences, insights and voices that both inform and enrich the corporate activities that are undertaken to enable Scottish Government to meet the diverse needs of the workforce. And we hope that the actions of all our diversity networks offer needed and valuable spaces so that staff have greater peer support and promote better understanding across the organisation. All of this is absolutely central to how we build a sense of belonging, which we know is a core aspect of inclusion. So REN itself has 4 strategic priorities, which are empowering, supporting and strengthening the membership of the network, capturing, learning, sharing knowledge and developing talent, championing anti-racist approaches across Scottish Government and Scotland, and supporting the Scottish Government to fulfil the race recruitment and retention action plan that we have. REN operates in 2 strategic spaces. So the first one is the social space, which is within the network, where we have REN and subgroup members who can support network activities which meet their needs and their expectations, and which those members can benefit from. So things like actually setting up the subgroups to meet specific needs, or the recently set up social spaces for REN members that we have to meet and chat informally. And then we've also got REN and subgroup members who drive forward initiatives and change within the network and beyond. So that could be like our development programmes and consultation with policy colleagues who are developing new policy. The second space is the corporate space, and that's out with the network. And we have corporate teams leading on activities, including the race recruitment retention action plan commitments that REN members can understand, they can contribute to, and they can support. And then we've also got our REN leads who lead on activities that corporate teams can support the network to develop.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Tia. A lot covered there. And Samiya, that's probably going to be something quite similar for your network in Wales, but is there something you would like to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Wales, our minority ethnic staff network, so McLennan as we like to call it, was established in 2002. We have around 70 members, so we're quite small, I think, compared to some of the other race networks across the organisation. But we pride ourselves in trying to be a voice for our ethnic minority staff. We act as representation and we work in various capacities, especially as steering group members for the Race Equality Action Plan. So Wales has announced that it will be an anti-racist Wales, which is a massive commitment. So we're working with the organisation to actively become anti-racist, and that is in various ways, but specifically we handle internal meetings with ministers in terms of recommendations, how to take things forward. We're developing anti-racist training internally, which won't be mandatory, but it's something that we're putting a lot of time and effort so it can encompass the lived experiences of our staff. We're facilitating those conversations. So one of the things that have come out of that is sharing spaces, which is a safe place for non-ethnic minority staff to come and talk about issues that they have with race or questions that they want to ask, and it just acts as a great way of collaborating across the organisation. One of the things that the network has also done is work in collaboration with our Women Together network to hold a project called Running Against the Wind, which was led by Dr. April Louise Pennant and Iona Hannigan-Lewis, which has snowballed into a massive effect for Welsh Government into getting positive outcomes. Internally, we also focus on promotion. I think that's also a big thing wherever you go in the civil service. And we have a work plan in terms of trying to increase recruitment so we are representative of the ethnic minority population in Wales.
Thank you, Samiya. And yes, that running against the wind report, we're going to come and talk about that in more detail. And it's great to see kind of the collaboration with other networks and the development of kind of allied groups as well. Alfie, you've got some pretty interesting stuff going on for your members in Northern Ireland, don't you, that you were telling us about previously? Is there something you'd like to share with this audience today?
Well, I'm just going to start by obviously introducing ourselves, and we're quite new to this as we were. Our network, our Organized Social Service Race and Ethnicity Network, was established very recently in August 2020, and this was during the period of Black Lives Matter, the rise in coronavirus hate crimes against the Asian community, and of course we have Brexit, where our EU citizens, friends, family, colleagues, were being targeted and discriminated against. So this was quite a challenging time to set up a network. Our network membership is itself open to all employees within our civil service and its related agencies. Non-minority ethnic colleagues or allies are also very welcome to join, but then whatever will become, we need to do it together. As regards being a very new network, our priorities, when it comes to priorities, as the saying goes, diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. So when it comes to diversity, there's the importance that the civil service, across the 4 nations, is representative of the people in society we serve. And for that, we need to ensure that it's very supportive and inclusive culture in our organizations, and that it's very welcoming and allows everyone to be themselves, and that we ensure that we make policies that benefit everyone in our communities. And to do that, we really need to work with minority ethnic colleagues and also the wider minority ethnic sector outside the civil service. When it comes to inclusion, that's where the network comes in, where we set up this network to support my colleagues and of course myself from minority ethnic backgrounds to ensure that our uniqueness and individuality is respected and valued. And being a very new network, our immediate priorities would be to refine our terms of reference, establish a executive committee, and develop a Organized Civil Service Internet Resource Hub to ensure that we have the capability to plan, to drive, support, and deliver. And now that we have this network voice, it's important that it has to be heard, and this is where the cooperation and collaboration happens within the civil service, as we'll be working closely with our HR colleagues to inform policies and initiatives within the civil service. Taking forward similar actions like my fellow network leaders when it comes to outreach, engagement, recruitment, retention, training, of course, the diversity action plan. And it's important to recognise that minority ethnic colleagues, have those skills, knowledge, experience that can be developed and built upon through collaboration, whether it's within the civil service or with the minority ethnic sector. When it comes to supporting the staff itself, then our objectives would include, obviously being a support group for colleagues to come together to share experiences, to raise concerns, discuss issues, share solutions. It's also a platform to raise awareness and understanding of the issues faced by minority ethnic colleagues, whether that be through networking, information sessions, and also encouraging the visibility, promoting of staff role models. And another objective would be to obviously be a bridge between minority ethnic staff and the higher levels of the civil service, whether it be the board, the Diversity Champions Network. So those are some of the support I suppose we aim to provide as a up and coming network.
Thanks very much, Alfie, and that's a really important point there. That networks are good at creating the development opportunities that our membership would like to access, but we need to also remember that our networks have skilled members that have a lot to offer and a lot to contribute, and it's important that we utilise that too. And last but not least, can I invite Sharon from the Civil Service Race Forum to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Usman, and really great to be here today. I think like CSRF, the Civil Service Race Forum, is slightly different from other networks in that we are the umbrella group of the race networks across government. So I think right now we have around 60 networks, I think, who are part of us. Some of them who are really long established, like some of the ones here, as well as, and others from quite big departments, which have thousands of members, but others which have just been kind of established in the past 1 to 2 years are very nascent and kind of like what Alfie was saying, still figuring out how to kind of establish their structures and kind of put stuff in place to make it sustainable. And what we as an umbrella group do is to firstly agree kind of common positions and priorities across our network leaders, and then communicate that to senior leaders, usually in the cabinet office and central government, but it can also be kind of in other areas too. And then there's also an inward focusing element where we really want to do more capacity building for networks to kind of share those resources to be able to empower them and equip them to be able to run their networks effectively. And we do this through a number of ways. We've previously, through the NBPCA and the CPS, kind of hosted Sharon to do Power Staff Networks training, which was really fantastic. And she gave some really practical, helpful tips and models for us to be able to implement in running our networks. But we also support colleagues to go and participate on wider training, such as the Radius Network Leaders Program and kind of Bayman's leadership conferences and stuff like that, to support their development and then trickle down the impacts and effects to their networks too. I guess a few kind of things I wanted to pull out, like one is that it's so important for networks to have that policy focus. I think that networks excel a lot in terms of that role model, that inspiration, a lot of capability building in terms of, how do you apply for jobs? How do we support your progression? And I think that stuff is absolutely great. But I think also, and more we're seeing kind of networks step into that policy space, and some really good examples, in terms of, how the Scottish government, you guys have worked well to kind of develop that recruitment and retention plan that you mentioned just now in partnership with the Scottish government. I think that's a great example, because ultimately we need to be able to de-bias our systems and our processes and ensure they're as fair and inclusive as possible. And then I guess a kind of final reflection is well, two final reflections. One is on the importance of intersectionality, which I'm really pleased to hear many of our other colleagues having spoken about just now. And I think for CSRF, what we try and do is to complement the work that departmental networks do, recognizing that most of the changes that you can have are really at that local level with your HR directors, looking at your FCS and talking to your line managers and having those discussions about race and inclusion and how there might be barriers in play and what you can do about them. I think CSRF really tries to create spaces where networks don't have necessarily the capacity to prioritize, and it's largely bandwidth, which is normal because all of us are volunteers in addition to our day jobs. But as a result of that, we've established a kind of QT POC group, which is the queer, trans, and intersex people of color working group to kind of support colleagues who are identifying in that space and who don't feel that the other LGBT or kind of standard race spaces are safe spaces for them. And we've also established an ECO working group for East and Southeast Asian staff in the wake of all the anti-Asian hate crimes that Alfie mentioned over the past few years, but most race networks not having the kind of infrastructure to be able to support that particular group. So that's kind of one thing. And then finally, just reflecting on the importance of supporting the pipeline to ensure that it's not just, we're not just supporting colleagues inside government, but we're also promoting the civil service to other communities and encouraging them to apply, because the work that we're doing is really making an impact. And it's really important that people don't get turned off by the thought of becoming a civil servant because they see it as very white middle class or very privileged, or, there are so many stereotypes out there. And CSRF has done a bit, it's kind of, I think, more of a longer term objective than our immediate priorities. But we'd really like to be getting more into that space of kind of encouraging externals to be applying at all, kind of through all the programs, fast stream, apprenticeships, but also just through graduate schemes and just applying for jobs at all levels, not just kind of fresh graduates. So I'll pause there, but welcome further discussion.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, colleagues, for your introductions there. It's great to see that a lot of similar stuff is happening, but some very tailored approaches depending on which part of the country that you're in as well. It kind of gets us thinking about, how can we make sure that the networks between the nations and the different departments within this wider civil service are joined up and learning from each other. So this is kind of an open question to any of you to come in, but I'd probably put this to Sharon first, just given that role that you have with the wider civil service race forum. Yeah, so do you want to kind of offer your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the Civil Service Race Forum aims to kind of create more of that networking space across like leaders of different networks, and to keep it kind of reasonable, we generally kind of engage chairs and deputy chairs of networks, but of course people from executive committees do plug in as well, but it's very dependent on how each network prefers to engage with us. So we do this through a number of ways. One is that we hold network leaders meetings every 6 to 8 weeks. So there is kind of where we kind of present items and kind of talk about emerging initiatives, but also we put it out there to networks and say, do you have any good practices you want to share, or what are the particular things that you're interested in learning about? And we encourage others to take agenda slots too. So it's not just us. We've also, through our policy working group, launched a policy exchange cafe. So that's very much about getting kind of D&I practitioners across government. You don't have to be part of a network committee, but we encourage those who are to participate, and to kind of learn on kind of key topics across, the recruitment life cycle. So how do you facilitate inclusive recruitment? How do you support that talent management? How do you use data to back all of this up and to make those policy recommendations? Showcasing, putting a spotlight on kind of different network activities in these areas, and then facilitating that open discussion and exchange of views and best practice. And of course, I mean, part of the reason for us putting together this network directory, which we're launching today, was very much from this angle of, there's so much good work going on out there across government. Let's not reinvent the wheel. We have limited resources. We have limited time. If someone else there has developed that, let's talk about race training or kind of, other types of materials which are similar. How can we kind of share them? And by creating this directory and kind of sharing some of the contact details, we're hoping that networks be able to look at what each other are doing, email them to kind of secure that best practice. And I think longer term, we'd really like to kind of institutionalize some of our resources. So we'll have kind of more of a repository and archive. We've tried to do that before, kind of collating some race action plans. We didn't get that much response. But we can definitely have another push, because I think, particularly for new and emerging networks, sharing templates of terms of references, governance structures, this is all food for thought that people can then adapt rather than having to work and start from scratch. So that's our kind of longer term aim. And we really encourage others to get involved.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sharon. Just any other colleagues on our panel? Does anyone want to come in on that, about how the nations can kind of collaborate with one another through your networks? Yep, Alfie.
No, I'd just like to obviously agree with the sentiments expressed by Sharon there, that as she correctly flagged earlier, a lot of the important work, as we are all doing, is on mostly volunteering basis. So it's important that where there is best practice and resource, that we are sharing them. And it is evident that those who have been involved in this, there's the sheer passion and commitment and the willingness to do what they can in whatever positions they find them in, to advance, on behalf of their minority ethnic colleagues, or just to create a better workplace for everyone. So we are united in that, and as the entire said, there are best practice and resources we could share to help support each other. And I, for one, in Northern Ireland Civil Service, have been very grateful to our Scottish colleagues in helping give me direction in setting up our network, and I look forward to future collaborations with all of you.
Thank you, Alfie. I see a colleague has put their hand up, and we'll come to questions in a short while, if we may. But keeping on the theme of kind of the collaboration, I know, Samiya, in Wales, you mentioned earlier the Running Against the Wind report, and I know that's had far-reaching impact. For example, your network came to the Scottish RENS conference and spoke about it. And I think you've some learning shared with the Civil Service Race Forum too. So do you want to tell us, Samiya, about how about that report and what it covered, and the response that your network received on it?
Yep. So the report was conducted by Dr. April Louise Pennant and Iona Hannigan-Lewis. It was an internal report where they decided, in the wake of Black Lives Matter, that they wanted to see what staff feelings were in terms of their understanding of Black Lives Matter, their understanding of race, gender and intersectionality, their feelings towards diversity staff networks and the Welsh Government in general, if they thought there was any structural issues. So it was hugely popular. So they held 3 focus groups. One was minority ethnic staff only, one was non-minority ethnic staff only, and the other one was a mixed group. And then this was then published. So it has pointed out some themes. So a lot of people felt as though Black Lives Matter was a political issue. A lot of people felt that it was an issue mainly for Americans and it doesn't affect the rest of us. So combating those type of feelings and prejudices and trying to build those bridges. So it has led to a lot of people. One of the things that we noticed that Black Lives Matter, the re-emergence in 2020 led to a lot of people feeling empowered. So we have had an increase in allies for the Minority Ethnic Staff Network. It was some difficult and honest discussions, but that's kind of what we promote. So someone in the comments did ask regarding the sharing spaces. So it is a safe place just for white colleagues to come and ask questions. It's confidential. It's led by my co-chair, Ben Enriquez. And so that's been one of the recommendations from the report. It's generally been very, very positive. There have been some negatives. So for example, we did publish the report for others to access outside of Welsh Government. However, it was picked up by a right-wing podcast, which is kind of not the audience that we wanted. So for safety reasons, it's been pulled at the moment just while we kind of refine it for safety reasons. But that's, it kind of comes with the territory when you're trying to move forward. That internal report has also now fed into the Race Equality Action Plan for Wales, trying to get Wales to that anti-racist agenda. And as I said in the beginning, I think I missed it again, sorry, it was a collaboration. So it was a collaboration with the Women Together Network, which is hugely popular in Welsh Government. It is a lot bigger. So having that support from another network was very important in terms of reaching those goals and having those really, productive conversations.
Yeah, and that's really heartening to hear, and also that security point about making sure that when networks are doing things like this, they are obviously sensitive topics and it has to be dealt with sensitively, but in terms of colleagues who are participating in it, and I think that's some good learning for all of us to kind of take some stock on and ponder on. Sharon, I know that you in the Civil Service Race Forum published a comprehensive policy brief. So how did the findings and recommendations from your work kind of tally with that done in Wales?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So we took a slightly different approach, like semi-similar but semi-different, by starting, I guess, with the kind of mass data that the Civil Service has across the piece, with the People Survey and with the kind of workforce data packs to look at ethnicity and kind of where our colleagues were represented, both across kind of grades as well as departments and kind of location, to try and pull out kind of key themes and understand some of the barriers that might be existing there, as well as understanding where there is also, underrepresentation of ethnic minorities, for example, at senior grades, and kind of overrepresentation at grades kind of AO to SEO. And then having kind of done this kind of wide scale analysis and kind of run it past also quite a few analysts, then we held some focus groups. And I think overall we engaged around 1,000 colleagues across government, which was really helpful to kind of, but I guess our engagement was much less around the lived experience, and it was more around kind of where does this data tally with kind of what in your departments, and what should we be doing about it. So we had kind of a much more action focus in terms of the recommendations, but generally, like, all the key themes kind of very much tallied with stuff coming out from Samiya, sorry. We pulled this together to kind of make a lot of different recommendations, both on kind of where government can improve the quality and the regularity of the data it's collecting, so that we can better delve deeper into these issues, but also to have specific recommendations across, talent and bullying, harassment and recruitment. And that has then kind of informed Cabinet Office's approach to the inclusion strategy, which, fingers crossed, we hope will be published in the next 1 to 2 months, but time will tell. But yeah, I think it was a really interesting exercise for us, because, as set out in the government's reform statement last June, they're really keen on taking that evidence-based and data-driven approach to diversity and inclusion. And I think many people, if you look at staff networks, they can be like, oh, it's just a group of kind of disgruntled individuals, when actually there are very, very real barriers that exist. And there's a reason why, you know, in some departments, I think minorities are much less likely to get through sifting interview stages and much more likely to be on poor performance tracks, because there's, you know, microaggressions and unconscious bias. So yeah, it was a really good first step. But consciously want to get onto discussion, so I'll pass that to you, Usman.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Lots of information there, and you're right. Lots of questions are starting to come in, but I just want to kind of ask a kind of final question before we go to the Q&A session of kind of Tay and Alfie. Just very quickly, kind of if you can, and I know this maybe a bit of a struggle just to summarise in a few lines, but what's kind of your proudest achievements, Tay? You know, leading the REN in the Scottish Government.
Do you want me to answer first?
Yes, Tay. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I don't know if I can do this quickly, but I'll try. I'm glad you asked the question. I think we all know there's still so much to do to drive culture change, and so the systemic processes in place to enable our organisations to be truly anti-racist and diverse and inclusive workplaces where everyone can thrive. So there are a couple of things that spring to mind that I'm sure will resonate with people here, and not so much specifics. But the first is, I think it's very easy to overlook how far we have come at Scottish Government and the REN network, and what has already been achieved when we're so focused on moving forward and how much still needs to be done. Or perhaps we've had those who've joined the network a number of years after it's been set up and don't have the knowledge of where things started. So REN was set up in 2007, so well before my time at Scottish Government, let alone as REN co-chair. And some of the members of the network have been supporting Scottish Government and colleagues for a long time, championing race equality at a time when race equality wasn't seen as important. It certainly wasn't a priority. And then those members and others who have latterly joined all have ensured the growth, the sustainability, the continued visibility of the network, and also enabled REN to have the collective voice it has today. And the second thing is something that was touched on earlier. REN is a staff-led network, so members are volunteers who have day jobs, and they carve out time to support REN and other Scottish Government colleagues and keep race equality at the top of the agenda when there's so many competing priorities. And this has been the case even in the midst of challenging social change and circumstances. We've had the Black Lives Matter social movement. We've had an increase in general of hearing of racist incidents across the UK. We're in the midst of a pandemic where there is increased pressure on workloads to meet ongoing needs. People have to deal with their own personal challenges, particularly in the transition to home working or the impact of having COVID in the family and lockdowns. And we're reading reports evidencing the far-reaching and true impact of race inequality on minority ethnics, friends, families, and yet there is still the drive, still the compassion, the commitment, the kindness and the tenacity to keep moving forward, to champion race equality and actively support and initiate and drive and deliver activities to make this happen. This has taken many forms, so it's from people attending our monthly meetings, contributing to discussions or listening and learning about other cultures and lived experiences. There are those that are raising awareness and sharing knowledge and experiences across the organisation, those that are responding to members' personal needs, their development opportunity needs, and setting up initiatives and programmes which are providing much needed support. And what I frequently hear from REN members is that one of the key drivers for them continuing to do what they do is that they want to make a difference, not just for themselves as Scottish Government staff, but also their families and children are mentioned often. One way REN is doing this is enabling a more informed and inclusive policy to be developed for the people of Scotland. So I'm proud of all of that. And if I'm going to go into high-level specifics, I think the content of our annual report summarises everything we do, and it's amazing to see what's been achieved by REN, the quantity, the quality of delivery on activities from REN, and the quality and of the communications and the engagement with REN members, which has become really important since the transition to home working, and a lot of work goes into ensuring we stay connected, informed, inclusive and supportive, as well as raising our profile. And last but not least is REN identifying key issues, so calling out racism getting organisational processes right. We couldn't do any of this without REN members' support and their engagement and the ongoing hard work, and it's not easy. And for that, I'd just like to take this opportunity to say a huge thanks to all of our REN members and allies at Scottish Government, all of those network colleagues who have worked with REN in collaborative efforts, and that could be delivering key pieces of work. First thing that springs to mind was our very successful 2021 REN conference, which was delivered in partnership with our Race Allies network, or to collaboratively challenge and call out key issues. It's really appreciated. I'm looking forward to working with REN and Scottish Government colleagues going forward to support our ambitions within Scottish Government.
Thank you, Tia. A lot going on, a lot has been achieved, as you say, but a lot more to do, and I'd maybe biased here, but I'm very proud to support that network as well as in the Scottish Government. Alfie, I'm just conscious of time, but I do want to make sure that we're hearing from our friends in Northern Ireland as well. Is there any kind of key points of key activities that you want to reference that you're most proud of?
Is my mic on? Yes, is my mic on? Hello, is my mic on? Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello, hi, sorry. Very briefly, I suppose. Because we're obviously a very newly established network. One of the things I'm incredibly proud of is that having been established back in 2020, that a couple of months later, we as a Social Service were able to collaborate with the minority ethics sector in being able to take part in Black History Month for the first time. So that I'm very proud of what the network has achieved in a relatively short space of time. I remain incredibly impressed with the commitment and passion of our members, and the willingness to want to to make a difference. Together, with the minority ethnic sector for Black History Month, we were able to create a series of webinars delivered to our staff, by speakers from the outside with lived experience within, again, that word, safe shared spaces for those inclusive conversations. We are currently finalizing a series of more interactive webinars, hopefully over February to May 2022, again with speakers from our minority ethnic communities, here in this place we all call home. I hope that our civil service colleagues will be able to join us once those details are finalized. For me, I'm excited, to see what more our network can do as we go forward, as we continue to develop and empower and support colleagues from minority ethnic backgrounds to make a difference within the Northern Ireland Civil Service, but at the same time also be in a position to extend the warmest of welcomes, to anyone from our minority ethnic communities who wish to come and join our next family, and where they can be their true selves. In particular, I myself, as the Northern Ireland Civil Service Race and Ethnicity Champion, remain committed to supporting my colleagues from minority ethnic backgrounds and working closely with our partners in the minority ethnic communities to ensure we deliver and promote racial equality, diversity, inclusion, everything we do together in our shared society.
Thank you very much, Alfie. That's great, and thank you very much to all our panelists. So, as say, colleagues, it's great to see about 178 colleagues joining us on this call, and a lot of interaction has taken place on the chat, and my colleague Chris Ironside has been keeping an eye on that and feeding that in to us. I'd like to invite anybody who'd like to ask a question in person. You are more than welcome to do that. If you could just raise your hand. And whilst we're waiting for any hands to go up, I've got a question here, and the question came from Sohail Ahmed, who asks that he would be interested to know more about the anti-racist training that Samiya mentioned, in particular in terms of content, how that is being delivered, and any challenges or barriers that are being experienced. Samiya, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are taking part, so it's still in the early stages. The training hasn't been issued yet, so we're still in the consultation process. But what we've done is we've picked an external trainer. We've worked with them very closely to find the right person to conduct this training. And we want this training to be very much lived experience led. We feel like people will be able to better understand the experiences of their fellow colleagues when it comes from that lived experiences, rather than, you know, case studies from abroad or cases of racial injustice in the past, etc. So we're trying to make it as present and as valid or relevant as possible. So I think they asked whether we had any challenges. So we haven't had any challenges or barriers as such. There's a great corporate buy-in. There is great support from the Minister for Social Justice in Wales. So it has that, it's led from the top down, so it's a very collaborative approach. We do have some challenges in terms of terminology. So Welsh Government has decided not to use phrases such as BAME, but instead use Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic. Also, we've been deliberating whether we use phrases such as white privilege, because we wouldn't want to alienate anybody in the organisation. So currently we're just trying to develop the training as best as possible, but it will cover very in depth. I feel like I will be able to provide more information when we have finalised it. But I hope that kind of gives you an idea. One of the other things that we're doing as part of the anti-racist training is the organisation holds Let's Talk live events. So the Director Generals and the Permanent Secretary will hold these events, and we've had some specific ones to race where people can ask live questions as we're going along. I hope that provides some insight.
Thank you very much for that, Samiya. So I can see a number of hands have gone up. Can I invite colleagues, when I invite you to ask a question, tell us which department or government that you're from, and to keep your questions very succinct. I am conscious of time, and equally I'd invite panel speakers to be succinct in their responses too, please. So can I go to Jaswinter Kaur first, please? Jaswinter, do you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Usman, and everyone on the panel. Excellent discussions. My name is Jaswinter Kaur, and I am chair of the Ethnic Minority Network at DEFRA, Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and based in London. My question to the panel is that just like corporate organizations, Google, Bloomberg, or Facebook, etc., where there are centralized departments on equality, diversity, and inclusion, are we making any efforts to introduce such a body within civil services? So if there are no efforts, can we start some efforts so that people at the moment are putting their corporate hours in it, and it will be much more speedy process to bring this equality, inclusivity, if there are full-time paid positions to work on? So that's my first question. Second, until we achieve that, how to encourage our members, because we have more than 200 members, but on the working hands, we have always only 10 or 15, or even less, sometimes 3. So how do you encourage your members to start actioning things or being part of the delivery? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much for that. Who'd like to come in from the panel first? Anybody? Yep, Sharon.
Thanks, Jaswinter. Really great to hear your questions. So just in terms of, what's going on, I think it's really department by department who makes those decisions in terms of resourcing. I know some departments have dedicated race leads or race action plan delivery leads if they have a race action plan. Others, fund kind of people who support kind of the facilitation of networks, but others don't have anything. And it's really department by department. And I think every network should be asking if that is a priority for them for that resource. But I also think that it's really important that we bake into our corporate objectives, and also, for people to be able to have that time to support this work. Too often people are doing it outside of core hours, but actually if you have that corporate objective, it's reviewed as part of your performance management. It should be seen as part of providing that stretch and opportunity for individuals. And for the Civil Service Race Forum, we've been campaigning for a network business deal, which gives a kind of allocation of a certain amount of time for committee members of race networks to be able to engage in that. And I think that links to your second question, because ultimately, yes, people will get involved because they're passionate, but also so many great exposure opportunities that you can then use in job interviews in the future. That's not where you should be driven from, but I think there's definitely a hook there where we can kind of encourage people about the stretch and the opportunities and the support, that people can get if they're actively participating.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Tia, I see you want to come in. Is it on this question?
I think it's on the question of around engagement, and I think it is difficult. It is really difficult. We all have people. We've got a number But people join race equality networks for different reasons. Some just want to come and listen. Some just want to be in an environment where they feel inclusive and supported. Others want to be more active. But I think it's getting that balance of understanding what people are there for the co-chairs and the chairs to really understand what people are needing at that time as well. And things do shift. We are finding that within Scottish Government, we're in a very different place than we were even a year ago. So recognising what those needs are, recognising what people feel passionate about and want to focus on, and where the skills lie within there as well, and just pulling all that together into to kind of like different levels of being active. I don't think it's all about just, you know, those are hands-on. It's how do we help everybody to contribute in some way or another. From a resource perspective, that's always difficult. I think we are quite fortunate within Scottish Government where we have bolstered our diversity and inclusion resource quite considerably, and we're lucky enough to have Usman as well, who kind of straddles one foot into diversity and inclusion and the other foot supporting strategic development for RIN. But that's a relatively recent development, so I do appreciate other networks might not have that. So that's very, very, very useful to us and adds a lot of value. But it's also about some of the work that's being done needs to be led by the race equality networks. We are there to lead on and develop initiatives as well, and pilot initiatives and feed in the lived voices to support overarching objectives and ambitions of the organisation. So it's a real mix that kind of shifts, I think, with regards to both of those.
Yeah. Thanks very much, T. Alfie, I see you've got your hand up. I think you want to come in on this and we'll move to our next questioner.
Yes, I just like to add, in response to the questions. Yes, yes, I would agree about the the corporate hours issue. That yes, a lot of us are doing through voluntary basis, and within organised hours, we are exploring resourcing, as it were, to support networks, not just race and ethnicity, but the other diversity themes. When it comes to trying to encourage members, I think it's important that we all know the term action speaks louder than words. So where if the network is to drive something and there's an output, it will encourage those who might take an interest to contribute. That it is working, that is feeding through the civil service structures, and especially that there's visible senior management buy-in. So when that is there, those who have those ideas, have that passion, they see things working, then they want to get more involved because they know there will be an output. So it's important that we communicate what we have done and done well as networks.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm really conscious of time, colleagues, and as ever, with brilliant to have such an engaged audience and an engaged panel as well. Audrey Stepford is next on the list to ask her question. I know, Audrey, you've also asked your question perhaps in the chat, but please do feel free to come forward and ask your question.
Thanks very much, Ali. In fact, in the chat, the question that I've asked is different to the one I'm asking now.
Okay.
So both will need answering. So I work for HMRC, and in HMRC we've done quite a lot of work around recruitment and having an independent BAME panel member on board. And this has shown that candidates from a BAME background are approximately 16% more successful than when we do not have a BAME panel member. So, but trying to get HMRC as a whole to accept that it should be mandatory to have a BAME panel member is proving quite difficult. And I wondered whether you've encountered, anyone on the panel have encountered similar barriers, and if so, how have you overcome them?
Okay, thank you for that, Audrey. Sharon, you want to go first?
Sure, thanks. And also, let me apologise in advance because I have to drop off very shortly. I'm from the Department for Business, and this is something that we have baked into our diversity and inclusion strategy as well, in terms of trying to get more BAME and disabled colleagues onto panels. And this was an issue that we did encounter. What we did was a couple of things. The first was to create a system so that we got a lot of colleagues from protected characteristic backgrounds to sign up to volunteer to be on a list. So whenever there were opportunities to serve on a panel, the whole list would be emailed, and then they can contact the hiring recruitment manager. So it's not based on personal contacts, and it's really opt-in. If you're busy, no need to respond. If you want to serve, then you can. The second thing was looking at the recruitment guidance, and I think they've changed it. I'm not sure if it's all departments, but for ours at least, the chair of the panel has to be one above of the grade recruiting. The independent panel member could be one below the grade recruiting. And that really shifted the game, because actually, if you want to get promoted, it's so like going and serving in interviews and on CIF panels helps you to understand the system so much better. And if you're, for example, trying to go for the grade above you, serving on that interview panel, understanding the types of questions that are asked, seeing candidates that do well and don't do well, really, really helps you and supports you for that when you do go in for progression. So that's part of the way we pitched it to people, to get more people to apply. I do realize that for some departments, perhaps there's a smaller ethnic minority community, and perhaps this is an area where in the future we could do more joining up to kind of funnel willing ethnic minority kind of panelists and showing them opportunities and to support interview panels in other areas.
Okay, thanks very much, Sharon. I know you need to leave shortly, but thank you very much for coming along and for offering your insights. Colleagues, there's two more questions I want to bring in, and I was wondering if the panel would allow me to bring in the two questions, and then we can see who'd like to answer them. So can I firstly ask Sarah to come in and ask her question, and please ask her to be brief, and then I'll ask Nahida to come in. So Sarah first. Sarah.
Hi everyone. Just wanted to ask the panel question regarding career development programs. Specifically for ethnic minority members of staff, because, let me introduce. So I'm from the Legal Aid Agency, and I'm a committee member, so it's called Be Unique. So majority of our ethnic minority members of staff are at the lower grades. So, that's why I'm really trying to champion and push the initiative of developing career development programs. So I've spoken to our head of L&D to implement that and to help achieve a sense of belonging. So that's why I wanted to know if other race networks have successfully been able to do this.
Okay, thank you for that great question. And Nahida, do you want to come in and ask your question before I ask the panel to offer their replies?
Thank you. Yeah, Nahida Ahmed. I work for HMRC and I'm the race program lead. And it's interesting the question that's just been asked about career development programs, because we've just developed one in HMRC. We've also done race training and we've delivered to over 50,000 people. Given that HMRC is 65,000, that's a massive achievement. Developed in-house. And what I wanted to say here was sort of really actually a lot of the things that the Race Network do, so the career development program, they piloted, but it really needs to be the organisation that actually then takes that and delivers it. There needs to be some responsibility and accountability by corporate teams internally, and that's what works really well in HMRC, both with the race training, which wasn't done by the networks, but the network were integral in the development of it. But also same with the career development program. I mean, I am proud to say in HMRC, we've done a lot of what's been talked about today within recruitment, within development, within the training has already been done by HMRC, but it's been driven corporally by the central team. So I think it's really important for networks to join in and hold people to account.
Thank you very much, Nahida. And I can just see in my mind automatically going some learning there, and Tay's smiling. She knows exactly what I'm talking about. Can I invite the panel to come in and offer any responses? Anybody want to come in? Just feel free to come in. Come off. Come in. Anybody in career development?
In terms of career development at Welsh Government, so something that McLennan do is offer a very specific programme for Black Asian minority ethnic colleagues to join. So it's just a leadership programme specific to them, tailored to them. And we've run it a few years in a row and it's been very successful. Internally, we also we're developing workshops to work one-on-one mentoring, shadowing, step opportunities, so moving around within Welsh Government but different departments to kind of get people ready for promotion gateway. So that's some of the things that we're working on at Welsh Government.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm just conscious of time, and we're coming towards a close. So I know lots of questions. Can I thank all of our audience members for your questions? I'm asking Justin, as the event organizer from the Civil Service Race Forum, to take a note of all these questions, and we'll share them with our panelists, and then we'll offer some replies in writing offline, if that's okay with everyone. So I've been asked by the Civil Service Race Forum now to, just in closing, to share the directory that we have pulled together for the past couple of months. The ask is, please share this within your governments, within your departments, within your teams, but please do not share it out with government. It is for civil service eyes only. So please do abide by that. I'd like to use the directory to connect to colleagues in other networks, so you can access peer support and shared opportunities. And just to share some personal experience, in the time I've been in the civil service, I've had colleagues from other parts of the civil service get in touch with me. I've been at events that the Civil Service Race Forum have hosted, and so it is a great opportunity to connect with people that you probably wouldn't normally be able to connect with. Do share your network's events, activities, learning, practice with other networks. And if your network's information changes, because the directory is only good on the day that it is published, so your information will probably change, do please email the Civil Service Race Forum to update the directory as soon as possible. It's a living, breathing document, so it will be reviewed and republished every so often, and it is now owned by our colleagues in the Civil Service Race Forum. So all that it leaves me to do is to thank all our speakers, to Tay, to Sharon, to Samiya, to Alfie, for coming along, giving your time and offering your insights and experiences. Very much appreciated. And to thank all our colleagues joining us, 178, I think was the highest high point for us. Thank you all for taking out the hour to join us, and I look forward to working with you all and seeing how this directory is used. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.